Awesome. So thank you guys for joining on another Wednesday night um with Multifamily Freedom Chasers. Kevin and Edward here. Um we're just gonna go over some fun underwriting stuff and different topics. As you guys know, we're here every other Wednesday. We'll get into more the schedule. I'm actually gonna share my screen now so you guys can see that. And we'll just really quickly go through this, introduce ourselves, and then kind of go into what we're diving into and what we want to talk about. If you have additional questions at any point, put them in the chat. We'll have our eyes there as well. Um, or raise your hand. We'd love to hear you guys with any questions as well. I think that engagement is always fun too. So, like I said, Edward and Kevin here, deal sourcing and underwriting. We're here every other Wednesday.
Welcome everybody, welcome. And yeah, so we're looking forward to this. So today, we're going to be getting into a little bit of stuff about underwriting, starting to talk more about the method of it and why it is so integral to the whole part of the process. It's pretty obvious for a lot of people, but there's a lot of reasons behind it. And the more that we remember those reasons, the more we realize it is one of the most important parts of the whole process of getting a property under contract and successfully operating it throughout, and not just getting it acquired. So again,
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead, Ed.
yeah, and I was just gonna say I see a lot of there's gonna be a lot of familiar faces, a lot of people who've been on here before, some new faces. You may hear me say some of the same stuff I've said before, but given just the new year, like we're Kevin and I are not doing this, so we're gonna have a different angle, and you can get another perspective as well on a lot of the stuff we may have previously covered. And that's one thing I love about multifamily in general, underwriting specifically. Kevin and I, like we've underwritten a lot of properties together and then individually, and you'll get so many different perspectives and ideas, and you see something different every time, and just makes it more fun. I don't think a lot of people geek out on it like we do, but it leads to more opportunity, and I happily say that Kevin's very good at spotting those. Um, so yeah, that's kind of what we want to go over. Before we get too far into things, which we get pretty good at doing, a couple of the housekeeping stuff you can see here, just to keep in mind. And then our contact info, Instagram, email, scan this QR code, take a picture, and feel free to reach out to us. This is the vision for the Freedom Chasers. You guys have probably heard it a few times. And then this is just the team. You guys have heard from us in the past or throughout the week with the schedule, alternating Mondays, Wednesdays. So as you guys can see, 2 days are where we really hit hard on the Zooms, and we try to be consistent. So it's the same time every Monday and Wednesday. Who you're gonna get is gonna be different every week. And it all comes down to different perspective, experience, expertise, focus. Well, I think every single one of us are in different parts of the US, which I think is very
Yeah,
cool too. And I don't think we talk about enough. Like I'm based in LA. Um,
yeah,
not really far. I'm not very close to Kevin in that sense, but um, it's cool because we can just relate to our different markets.
100%. Yeah, I mean, completely different sides. You're in LA. I'm down in the Miami area, and the team is reflective of just the diversity of experience and perspective. So that's what makes the community so great. So again, yeah, thank you everybody for being here tonight.
And here are just the different platforms you can make sure you're in the WhatsApp group. Check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, and Instagram. And then this is the WhatsApp group chat. I'll leave this on here for a little bit just so you guys can check it out. I'm sure a lot of you guys are in it. If there's a way I could put the link, I would, but I don't think I can do that now. And then if you don't have it, I can put it up later at the end of the Zoom as well if anyone misses it. Um, so there we go. And then I'm gonna stop sharing for now and kind of get into what we were hoping to talk about today. Um, and a big thing with underwriting, and you guys have heard me say this in the past, is being able to translate the underwriting and understand all the different type of templates, calculators, terminology, three different people may call the same thing three different things. Why? It's the English language. Like that shouldn't surprise anyone at this point. It's already complicated. Add the chaos that is real estate into the equation, and you're just gonna make it more complicated. So that's something we want to do is because it doesn't help you guys if we only go over the underwriting that we're familiar with or that we've used because we realistically can underwrite almost on any calculator because we just understand what goes where, what the correlation is, what the relationship is, and how the two numbers, which essentially all it is we're putting numbers on a spreadsheet and trusting the system, but we know it also doesn't look right, which I think is a big thing too. So yeah, and I think Kevin's actually probably more experienced than just given his experience in with underwriting and stuff in commercial space.
Well, I mean, it comes down to kind of what I was babbling about a moment ago. It's underwriting is so imperative because again, the job of underwriting is to verify numbers, because again, many brokers are going to try and spin things in ways to make a property as appealing as possible for any buyer to be attracted to it. So you always have to push through that, look at the data, and really dig into it, and then extrapolate it into different scenarios, those what ifs. You can't just take things on surface level. And the more you dial in, the more you try and tweak and test and look for pain points, the safer you'll be on the other side. And that's the whole point is the tougher you get in underwriting, the more time you will end up saving in your lifetime because you're not going to go a month into a deal and then find out it's not going to work. You want to figure that out 3 days in if you just did a really hard dive. So that's why I care so much about it because again, it's all about, to me, it's not about the return on investment, it's about your return on time. So to keep that resource top of mind.
And we're on a call today too. And if anyone's trying to raise capital, be a part of a deal, involved in a deal, um, I said this a lot, and it may not be the most popular opinion, but it's my opinion. If you don't know how to underwrite, asking for a seat at the table becomes very difficult because raising capital is going to involve understanding the underwriting and being able to relate it. So I did want to share this actually, or just share my screen real quick and show you guys. Now I can't share all of these calculators, but like this is just a few examples uh, of all the different and some that you guys are definitely familiar with, like the Michael Blank SDA. My famous one just labeled Ed's calculator, the napkin underwriting one, and then another one that's just fine. So a finance calculator. So as you can see, there's a lot of different calculators, some more advanced, some more basic, some with multiple different variations included in that. And then obviously the one I think I personally probably use the most and I've gotten most familiar with. But if you don't get familiar with this page alone can mess up a lot of your underwriting, and I'll go into that more later. And then some of the complex ones where it's like just a lot of stuff going on, right? Is there a right calculator? I I don't think so personally. I don't know, Kevin, if you have like one you prefer, probably, but
So for me, it's not, what I realized is at the end of the day, it's not about what I prefer. It's going to be what is the most comfortable, universally acceptable format. So like the one that you have open right now, the Michael Blanc, probably ends up being that one. Because the most family shops or funds or operators you're going to talk to, they've probably run across this one if they don't actually use it for some level of what they do in acquisitions. So it makes the conversations more simple. You can get people to kind of read through your business plan a lot faster, when you're trying to talk to different partners or investors, et cetera. So yeah, while I think there are others out there that I have seen that just blow your socks off compared to this, that are really more advanced and have really complex structures built into them. Those are awesome, but then you can get lost in the weeds of the learning curve. And that's where you have to start to realize when you're building your kind of library of resources, how much time do you want to invest in mastering each of these tools? Because if you don't master the tool, you shouldn't be using it to buy multi-million-dollar properties with it. That's not being very wise. So, yeah, I mean, what do you think, Ed?
So I was gonna answer that. A lot of it does come down to as well as if you're on a team or you're working with a team or you have a preferred team. I don't say you have to, but I definitely recommend utilizing at least a similar
Mhm.
form of underwriting to where, hey, on this page, on this cell, and you're looking at the same number, or at least if I say, hey, Kevin, go to the summary, look at the IRR, or look at the member equity, or look at the P&L, which this screen can get a little crazy at times. I noticed this on for the leasing and marketing. Like, we're talking about the same thing, right? And we make sure that we don't have different labels and XYZ. And obviously, I think any deal we've ever underwritten, we've done it separately and then kind of like put one together. Because I feel like if we both look at it at the same time and our own opinions kind of interject into it, then you're not gonna have your true like, okay, this is what I think and this is what Kevin thought. And then now we have two opinions looking at it, and I think that just um allows just more option. And it's funny because like underwriting seems like it's like, oh, you're just putting numbers on the sheet and seeing what comes out and what the results are, but it's a lot more creative than that, in my opinion. And that's where the fun comes in. For example, just on any specific deal, and especially going back to the last time we were on a Zoom, the area expertise and the marketplace specific knowledge, like there's no one I trust in Florida more than Kevin when it comes to underwriting specific like assumptions because he's done it. So I'm like, hey Kevin, anything in Florida, like regarding any specific assumptions we need to make, that's the information you need. That's what separates your underwriting from someone who's underwriting because they said they like Florida but has never don't understand the market
Well,
the same way a great broker can.
I mean, what I would say is I go to the scenarios tab, and so the way this is designed, on column one, you're putting whatever is provided to you by the seller or their broker, and then everything else is you can redesign those columns as you see fit, but to different scenarios that you get to play out, and you get to play it out quicker in the sheet. So that's a nice thing about this type of a tool. But yeah, I mean, it's just what's important is just being able to realize that, one, even on the expenses, the names of the rows, people might change those out over time, or when you are going into the underwrite, you start looking at it, and maybe like the leasing and marketing, we'll use that one again. Maybe to you going in, you're going to think, okay, well, that could be just like bonuses to the leasing agents that you're hiring, or little things like that. And then you don't stop to think, okay, but is it actually like, is it Yardi software? Is it the Appfolio, like the back end that your office needs? Like, what other expenses is it really supposed to be including? And is it too light or not? Because again, brokers, two things to me are always a constant in commercial real estate. An OM and an LOI is just as good as toilet paper. Like, they're used for different reasons in the process, but at the end of the day, we cannot rely on those documents. Like an LOI is great, it sets up the attorneys to a quicker timeline for success on a contract, but you're not under contract, it doesn't mean anything. And then when it comes to the underwrite, or the marketing material, the offering memorandum that you might get from a seller or a broker, you have to read between the lines. You have to go through it all. T12s are usually going to be a much quicker pathway to the truth than an OM will be. So, that's what I like the most about an off-market property is just you get to go right past all the fluff. You just get the numbers, the rent roll. Does it work? Does it not? Is the seller realistic? And then you just move on. So, again, when it comes to return on time, it's important to be able to look at these things. So if you take the marketing package information of insurance and you're looking at a property in Florida and this property has not traded hands in like 6 years, you can't just carry the number over and like inflate it by 5%. Your replacement value is going to skyrocket. A lot of different things are going to happen. Your insurance is probably going to double, maybe triple. So if you don't know that going in, your whole underwrite is already way off. So the research and figuring out your assumptions is one of the most important key moments of success. I mean, and in your experience, because based in California, we joke about this. Like, how many markets do you underwrite in? Just California, right?
Well, I don't buy in my backyard, but that's besides the
Exactly,
point.
right? But because like you've realized that there's so many other markets with good opportunities. I mean, how many do you think you probably underwrite in?
We get deals in states alone, like four, like five or six,
Yeah. So
not even counting specific cities. Like just think about your backyard, wherever, like where you guys are sitting now. You go a couple of miles, even a couple cities, either direction, that can change a lot, especially if it comes down to like even tenant laws and restrictions or like things of that sort. Like a big thing too that to Kevin's point regarding the OM or just any previous information, I think the biggest one to be aware of is the taxes. If you rely on the number that is given to you and don't verify it, you're gonna have a very bad wake up call when you get the actual quote or the surprise in the mail. Like that can throw it out. Like the whole deal can be thrown out the window just on taxes. And if someone hasn't had or has owned the property for 15 years, even they're definitely, at least in California for sure, you're paying a very different tax bill than if you buy this tomorrow. Shoot, if you bought it, like for us, it comes down a lot to the purchase price more than anything, and you have to be really careful. Like if you don't know that, or you get reassessed, and you're not underwriting for that large discrepancy, yeah, that's a bad wake up call, like a rude awakening. To be fair,
oh yeah, it could. I mean, it could eat your entire profit.
for sure. And that's and I think it's even worse if you're pitching to like LPs, for example. Guys, the biggest thing, and I want to make this clear, the underwriting isn't only to make sure you know it's a good deal. Your LPs, the people who are going to put the money to make this deal happen, you can find the best deal in the world. It's kind of like you give a chef a great recipe. You have to be good at understanding it and putting it to work and in effect to raise the capital. If you don't have that basis of I understand the numbers, I trust my numbers, I think that's a big part too. Like trying to sell something you don't trust is really hard, or have confidence in, and then saying, "Hey, like investors will grill you. Like if you want to have fun with that, I think that's something we can probably schedule one day where we just grill people's underwriting and deals. I think that'd be really fun. I don't know how many people will like it, but I think it's a pretty cool trial run, essentially, like role playing. We always role play like agent outreach. I think role playing, like pitching a deal, would be fun too. Um, but they're gonna ask those questions. Like Kevin and I were on a call today, and even after as many calls as we've done, people ask questions we haven't heard before, and that just means you're talking to the right people. That's not a bad thing. It's like we know the answer. It's just hey, that's a new one. Cool. Like that's good. Like I'm happy people are thinking of that. And specifically, and I don't want to focus too much on the Michael Blank calendar, but like Kevin mentioned, a lot of people are familiar with it. This page, in my opinion, is the one that you can lose a lot, like in a lot of different directions. Whether it's making sure your rent increase makes sense and is actually like projecting how you think you will with the specific property, making sure your vacancy and the concessions adjust appropriately and your expenses adjust appropriately. Because
Yeah.
and I think Kevin and I have done this on a lot of deals too. Don't be afraid to overwrite the stuff as long as you've made a copy and you don't completely ruin your master copy, because you want to one expect for the worst. Like at year three, we don't know what could happen, and XYZ may be affected. Like, hey, if things go wrong at year three and or we have some projection or forecast of something happening, always factoring that in to be conservative about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so. especially a sheet like this, like it's color coded, right? So the blue is stuff that you could change, or that is a variable. And there's another area of the sheet somewhere, which would be the scenarios tab, that you're supposed to change those variables. Like, so you have to remember that these are very complicated files. And if you start going around and changing stuff, one, if you don't make that master backup, you're really SOL pretty quickly, just because you lose some of these formulas and then it's really hard to backtrack it. So you want to be careful with that. But as you start dialing in on a property and understanding more about different things, or maybe realizing like, hey, wait a minute, this management fee is really low, which is I think a lot of brokers do to make numbers look better. I looked at a deal recently where we were about to submit an LOI, and then we realized that in the underwrite, there was management fees and stuff, but there was no payroll. And the property was big enough to require, on-site staff. So we realized again, once we put more numbers in there, it wasn't a deal anymore. So we decided to walk away. And things like that will happen all the time. And again, it's better to do it now than to dig into the deal, maybe start spending a little bit of due diligence money, and then you find something out and you have to walk away anyways. So again, underwriting is to protect you, your team, your LPs from anything in the future. And you need, if you're going to be in an acquisitions role, you got to take that role seriously in that regard, because at the end of the day, it will be a lot of your responsibility. And then when you're after it's acquired, it's handing it over to those operators to make sure that the projections match, that the performance matches or exceeds those projections. So
I, I think that's an interesting point too, regarding just the general like payroll and what that looks like, and um how that all factors into it. Like that's something I'm sure we could spend an hour on by itself,
yeah,
just based on size, proximity. If you have multiple locations, which nowadays I don't know, I feel like it's pretty common where you'll see if the 100 units is based on like two different properties, and maybe they're not right next to each other all the time, and they have different rehab phases or build out phases, and that's just going down another rabbit hole that I don't necessarily want to go down today, but that's something that we'll consider as well, and we can go over another day.
yeah. I mean, to a degree, at some point, you start to realize that when you're underwriting, you're gonna think of things generalized as like a cost per door, or a percentage of your gross operating income. There's certain ways that you start to look at things. So, management fees, usually, whatever broker OM might say, you want to kick it up 1 or 2 points. The payroll, you want to make sure that, usually at least $1,000 a door. I mean, a lot of states that we're underwriting in, like $1,000 to 1,500 a door. A lot of different things, but you have to remember, like, what property are you buying, and what type of property do you actually want to maintain and operate, and then dispose of after your 3, 5, 7, 10 year cycle of your deal. So a lot of times we're all looking for these value adds, and that's what a lot of us are here for, is value add multifamily. And so you have that thought of, oh, maybe I'll take a C to a B minus, or I'll be able to adjust it, the class, the level, the quality. Well, your underwriting better be able to prove it, and better be able to show that you can really not just barely make the mark. We're not trying to make the numbers work. We're trying to find the cracks. We're trying to find issues, anything that could put our money, our investors' money, at risk. So I don't know. I know I'm kind of beating a dead horse now on that one, but Ed, do you want to show any of the other tools a little bit? I mean, we can go into these, we will, but right now, guys, it was kind of just like the one-on-one intro course, like first day of the semester. We just kind of want to start this out and let you understand where we're coming from and why we take these topics that we chose with MFC so seriously. And we want to share that passion on the acquisition side with you guys, and take you through that.
Yeah, and like this is one that I know some people who acquire a good amount of property and um use a lot of or do a lot of underwriting. This is kind of what this specific sheet is how I really first practice, because obviously it's a lot more simple than one with 10 to 12 different tabs. This is one screen, right? So I just got very comfortable with this, and I've played with it so much where if you removed all the formulas, I'd probably be able to recreate it pretty quickly just off of memory. And then also, I'm not suggesting this by any means, but eventually you get to the point where you get to have fun with it and start adding your own columns and sections that would be more beneficial to you or favor what you're looking for. Like I made some improvements here too, which it's fun to play around with. I enjoy doing it. So this is a very simple one, and here's something to keep in mind too with any calculator is understanding what it's trying to relate. Like for example, the Mango Blank one does a good job of year by year projections. This is what you're gonna get year into through year out, and you can compare different scenarios pretty easily using the scenario tab, right? This one is not that straightforward. It's what is it today? What is it 5 years from now when I exit? Or what even pro forma? Maybe you're far from pro forma. Um, so that's something to keep in mind too. Is what goal am I trying to accomplish with this specific underwriting tool, whether it's a calculator, spreadsheet, whatever it is, that's really important. And then there are some information on here that you'll see common to a lot of them. And this is something I want to point out in the last one. Anytime you're trying to plug in the market cap rate, if you're gonna guess less favorably to what you would want as the person selling it, or the team, or the organization, the group, because when you exit, and it's more evident on this calculator, but when you're exiting, there are some things on this calculator that you may not notice or know what it means. For example, this the cap rate bump, that's not factored in here, right? And what the cap rate bump is essentially every year I'm putting this little bit of a buffer where if in 5 years I sell and the market's not as strong, the cap rate's not as strong in the seller's favor, I've put that in there just in case.
Yeah, and that's
Which
also known,
means,
sorry, and that's also known as cap rate expansion. That's another way that a lot of people know it. A lot of people talk about cap rate compression when it's dropped, the cap rates drop, and then they expand when they go up. So you want to always expand your exit cap rate just to be safe.
yeah. And for example, like I know on this one, yeah, I can do it. But if you just look at the formula without making changes, they equal the same number, right? So if I change this to 7, it changes both of them to 7. Now that completely disregards what we just said. So I don't love that about this. Now, obviously, I can play with it and make that change myself. But if you just pick up this calculator and that's the default, and you don't want to play with it, or you don't know how to add that or adjust that because it's going to take some Excel familiarity and playing around with, you've also not underwritten for that component that, in my opinion, is very important, right? So that's another thing too. It's not only learning these tools to help you with your craft of underwriting, which it kind of is, but also knowing like, hey, does it relay exactly and put in the correct precautionary things, buffers essentially to your underwriting that you want? Because I'm not kidding you. When you're in front of an LP, when you're acquisition, your capital raisers, whatever, whoever it is, they use your underwriting and you're getting drilled on it, you're in a war room. Like that's what it's kind of gonna feel like sometimes. Because at the end of the day, you're in the hot seat, and if they're gonna poke holes at it, no one's gonna write you $100,000 check without trying to destroy the deal the same way we look to do every time we underwrite,
Yeah,
right?
they are going to poke the holes. So if you don't, then you're not preparing even for that pitch meeting with the investor. I mean, there's so many reasons why it's better to really grind a deal down as much as you can, even if you know that. I mean, nobody knows for sure, right? And like we don't know what we don't know, but you want to prepare for a lot of eventualities with the understanding that the percentage of risk with each of those is different. But at least if somebody's coming to you and you're meeting them and they might invest $250,000, 500,000, 100,000, 50,000, 10,000, it's still money is money to them. They're going to ask you whatever questions they need to feel comfortable. So if you can't force yourself when you're underwriting to ask yourself these questions from different perspectives, you are leaving yourself vulnerable for that other meeting. And again, the more you dig in, the better of an expert you are in a deal as you're going through it to be so comfortable to explain it to people, etc. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and the last thing we want is your first deal to be your last and only, because
right.
that's never great either. But yeah, and guys, again, we're gonna reiterate this. Like, this all does take practice. Like, this becomes easier the more you do it, the more deals you look at, the more um scenarios you look at. That's one thing I do like, and I hate going back to this every 5 seconds, but I feel like it just relays a lot of what we do, and the familiarity with it, of like these different scenarios, being able to see what happens with ABC helps as well. Um, so that's one reason why I like that calculator as well. Um, and then like an underwriting one is always useful too, or just gives you a quick um idea of like, hey, just what is this property worth? Like, I don't want to worry about the upside. I don't want to go crazy. I just want to have like a really quick idea of like, what are my X's and O's? Because at the end of the day, if you're hoping that you're getting a lot of deals brought to you, that's the goal we all have, is build something and let the deals come to you. Obviously, you're gonna have to verify. And another thing is as you become more familiar with these different tools, different calculators, different underwriting, when people send you their underwriting, it just becomes that much easier to dissect and understand. And one thing that we've done in the past and is on our YouTube and through MFC, and we'll go through as well, eventually, is knowing where to look for this information just makes it that much easier, and that takes practice. Unfortunately, and I think Kevin's seen more, he's for sure seen more OMs than I have, but they're never the same, and they're never like the information you need is right in front of you. You kind of have to dig, and it gets annoying. Like, I'm sure a lot of people on this call have looked at them too, but you spend so much time looking for information. The last thing you want to do is scramble and where do I plug it in, right? So there's that too.
100%. And to touch on that point of like a really good one, that's quick, for like just to begin of like, should I even start digging into this? Like the Michael Blanc one comes in again, where he has the 2 minute underwrite tab there, the 2 minute analysis. So super simple, right? You put it in, you put in some vacancy to show your physical and your economic, which is your bad debt and et cetera. Um, and then keep your high expense ratio. That's the whole point with whatever the current market cap is. If you're working with a broker, they can pull that real quickly if you don't have that data already available through some other tool. So you put that in real quick, and you're like, all right, you know what? Let's start to dig in deeper. You could do that in 2 seconds, not even 2 minutes. So there's a lot of little things like that to remember. Keep putting it past little tests. Does it pass the test? All right, let's open up the next can on this worm, and you keep digging and digging and digging until you've answered all those questions. Always think of a deal as like, even if it's up to you, that you still got to report to the board of directors, right? That you got to pitch it to somebody. You got to convince yourself 10 times over that the deal is right. Don't just do it one time and run around shouting, at the top of your lungs that you found a deal. So,
And to
um,
the point of like the OMs, and with when you're working, especially with a lot of the agents, that's really, especially in the commercial space and the multifamily, like this level, when you're dealing with like these larger unit counts, the agent isn't always there like to sell it all. It's more of a buffer to the owner, right? A lot of owners don't want to get bombarded with calls. They don't want to deal with the X's and O's and the contract, all that fun stuff that brokers love to do. But remember, as much as the broker and the owner are underwriting it, remember that's only a small group of opinions. They may price something and thinking they're spot on or high or low, and you come in and you're like, wait a minute, why is this priced here? Can I get it at that price? And that's something to keep in mind too. Just because something, it's not like a single family home where I can say my neighbor sold for 500, I'm gonna list mine for 500 and see what happens. And you're getting 100 different opinions on it. especially in this space, and I forgot, I've heard this from someone. I don't want to say the name because I don't want to say the wrong name, but so many deals happen before anyone sees it. I don't think we even understand. And that's the crazy part. Like, hey, here's an opportunity I found. Cool. And then all of a sudden, Kevin's like, oh, Ed, I found this. Let's look at it. We're like, okay, if no one else has seen this, or like it's, let's say it's a broker friend of ours, right? Their opinion, you only have like maybe 4 or 5 people's at the most, people's opinion on what that property is worth and the potential of it. If we see it from a different lens and we see more opportunity because we may know something different, we may see different comps or whatever the case is, all of a sudden we've identified an opportunity that no one has a shot at. That's where this becomes very fun and exciting when you realize huge amount of potential in a deal that just kind of falls into your lap.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a good example right now. I can't, I can't divulge the specifics here, but it's a 150 plus unit property in the Houston area, and like I was calling a broker friend of mine out there to wish him Happy New Year, and they're like, oh, by the way, I just got a new listing, and I'm still working on the marketing package, and I was like, oh, all right, well, don't worry about that marketing package. Just send over those financials. Like I don't care about your marketing package. And we kind of had a chuckle about that. And then a day later, I get an NDA. A day after that, I get T12 and a rent roll. And I'm like, all right, here we go. And, we do our underwrite, come up with a number. And I come back to him and I'm like, hey, you haven't told me yet. Like, where do you think you want to take it to the market? Like, what are you building your marketing package for? He gave me the number and I was like, $200,000 off from it already. So I was like, oh, all right, sounds like this might be a layup. And like it's those moments where you're like, this is great, because again, it's the relationship. Um, it is a relationship with a broker as well. So beyond that, it's a friend, but still he's a broker. All I was doing was reaching out, just saying hi, Happy New Year. So like you don't need to call and ask like, what do you got, or only call people because they have a listing. Sometimes just calling the brokers in certain areas and just introduce yourself and say hi. You can find some stuff.
And I know we said this before, but I want to say it again because I believe of how important it is. Um, I'm a big believer in so many more deals happen with agents and brokers and know each other, and you have that confidence to close. And it's like that familiarity and like, hey, I know we're friends. If you're reaching out to someone, you're wishing them Happy New Year. Like you guys are, you're friends. Like you care about each other. You're asking how each other are doing. You hope everything's going well. But like, hey, I want to see that person do well, and they want me to do well. Why don't we do well on the same deal together? Because at the end of the day, and I've said this 100 times on these calls, brokers don't care about anything but getting it closed. They don't owe anything to anybody but the seller to getting it closed, because at the end of the day, they don't get paid if they don't. Whether you're the buyer or I'm the buyer or anyone on this call is the buyer, you have to close in order for anyone to get paid that's involved in the deal. That's the bottom line. That like I've heard this before on other multifamily Zooms, and even in residential, just crazy to think sometimes. They'll give the deal to the person they're most confident can close before the highest price.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line.
So I know we've been talking for a lot, so I appreciate you guys kind of listening to our everything. Does anybody have any questions or anything right now, or anything we can address?
Also, I do know on previous, or like we used to on Tuesday call, yeah, Tuesday calls, we would like do like these short little quick underwrites. That is something we are open to implementing as well. If you guys are getting a lot of deals that you need help underwriting, we will do a sample of the of like going through a deal quickly through like a 2 minute analysis or one of these other calculators that allow you to get an idea of like what are the few things we looked at, that might even do do a full Zoom one eventually because of like it could go a lot longer in that sense.
Mhm.
So if you have deals you want like eyes on or something like that, message us and we'll eventually like pick a Zoom where kind of like open floor,
Well,
give some.
yeah, I mean, we'll be doing some case studies for sure down the road, but again, this is more of a 101, to reintroduce for the new year, like what we're doing, what is underwriting, and how do we approach it, and again, this is part of that arsenal, that back end of some of the different tools that you can take out to figure properties out, and sometimes you do multiple layers where you're going to do one calculator, then bring it to the next, and bring it to the next, then call somebody, give them the financials, see what their underwriting comebacks at. That's the whole point of it all. Um, but what I did also want to say, so some of these sheets, to address some of the questions, like how they get them. Again, some of these are proprietary, so we wanted to show them as tools. And there's different sites and communities and different things out there where you can find different tools. So if you want, you can reach out to Ed or I offline, and we're more than happy to kind of point you in that direction. But some of these are proprietary, so we just want to show them as examples visually, and introduce some of you guys to them if you might not have seen them before.
Yeah, forgot to mention that before, but yeah, thanks, Kevin. Um, and going back, like one of the questions I want to kind of like bring to the forefront that was asked in the chat about different asset categories. Um, that it's actually a very good question because I've looked at different asset categories. Kevin and I both have. One thing I do like, and again, it goes back to familiarity and understanding like what your assumptions are, and like really knowing what you're looking for and knowing the asset class specifically, because no two asset classes share all the same rule of thumb, right? Your expectations are different. Your obviously your expenses are very different. How the taxes, insurance, the XYZ, the ABCs are all um, essentially allocated are different as well. I know on previous Zooms I have done mixed use, which that's a fun one, and that's a different monster in itself because you have to factor rental leases, commercial leases, complexity of that. We did it. I remember the one we did had a CVS and like some crazy, um, like non-concrete numbers that factored into the income. That's always fun to play with. And even as far as mobile home parks, which I know that's one that has had a little bit of popularity in recent years, I would say. Um, Even commercial, triple net, all that fun stuff, like solely commercial or industrial. Um, I'm in the team of if you get familiar with underwriting, get familiar with the assets, and get familiar with the income in, the expense out, and your kind of what is the norm and the assumptions I should make regarding vacancy, turnover, rehab, all that stuff, and you really understand the market and a specific location and how that can all be affected. Um, this part becomes a lot easier, and the underwriting becomes easy because you're just again we're going back to plugging numbers into a cell,
Yeah.
right?
But and also, I mean, with the asset class thing, like you will look at it, but remember, like right now, this is part of the Multifamily Freedom Chasers community. We're going to be focusing on multifamily assets. But some align a lot closer than others. So, and some are really complex in their own regard in terms of how you would have to look at things and understand the intricacies of, retail leasing and different things before you could really start to underwrite a property of that asset class. So that would be like retail would be a can of worms. I don't think I will be approaching with everybody from a base level education standpoint. Like self-storage could be a potential, mobile home or RV park could be a potential, maybe hotel, though, unless you have some grasp of the hospitality industry and how it's looked at, because again, you're renting the rooms per night versus long-term leases. And it's not as straightforward as some Airbnb type approach might be, if you have Airbnb experience or short-term rental experience, but it's pretty close. But again, like we can look at some of those things, and that's not a problem. We'd love to hear that feedback as we keep going down the road this year. Um, But I know that, you know, underwriting is for sure muscle memory, being able to just continue to go through the paces. I've underwritten at least 700 to 800, doors worth of properties this week, and pitched several of them to two groups, and we have LOIs out on one of them right now. So, and preparing LOIs on more. So, I mean, it's just about continuing to do the work. It'll come back for you in the long run, and this is just to help build, either an LOI or that conversation with your team to see where you take your next steps, and it's an integral part of the whole process. So, again, does anybody else have any further questions? Or I just want to make sure, because it's hard to read the room out there with everybody's cameras off and everything. We're trying to figure out the energy here in the room.
Last asset class I want to throw into the hat as well. The one that I not struggle with, but just need, I like to pick people's brains about is a hotel conversion. That sounds like a fun one, just based on the engineering behind it and the rehab. So that's we'll save that beast for a different day. But yeah, please let us know. We're going to be on here
Yeah.
for another 10 minutes.
Conversions, I will mention on that. Like, a lot of people get excited about some of these things that I feel like jump up and down in popularity, but the conversion thing, I'll give a good example of right now. I've got a client looking. They're a family shop of hotel owners, and they're looking at a failed hotel to multifamily conversion where the developer ran out of money, because they thought they were finished, and then, to get the CO, the certificate of occupancy, the city said, "Oh, where's your fire sprinkler system?" And a few other things, and so all of a sudden they realized they had almost another $750,000 of capex to go, and they just said, "You know what, this is enough." And they're looking for buyers. So things like that you got to be careful of when you start to underwrite, because zoning considerations or relationships with the building department become a big part of what your underwrite needs to be. It's not just numbers. It's actually going out and actually making a few calls, doing some of that grunt work to figure out, does the local zoning and code enforcement department play ball in terms of re-entitling, or maybe you need a variance on a setback to make something happen for your building. And you better have those conversations before you start developing your LOIs, because if all of a sudden the city says, "Yeah, we'll let you do that, that right of way change or something on a street, but you know what we want you to do? We want you to pay for that new street light that we're going to install." And like, that street light is, $85,000, because why not? It's a government product. So, things like that, you gotta really think about, and it's impossible to prepare for, because again, those are big variables, unless you make those calls and actually do the work, hoping that it's going to pay off in the end.
Yeah, and one thing I want to ask that, and I love the question on different asset classes, and I'm not trying to deter anyone away from it, but don't make it more complicated than it needs to be. Like, if you're just getting your feet wet, if you're just trying to figure the apartment multifamily space out, and you're just trying to, um,
How's it going? All right.
and you and you're just trying to, like, understand the underwriting, don't make it more complicated than it needs to be.
Yeah.
I learned underwriting 2 to 4 units. And I thought this is pointless. Like, especially in LA when none of it works, I was like, this is so dumb. But eventually we kind of like, I got out of the phase of, okay, let's go somewhere else and let's look in Ohio and Texas and North Carolina and South Carolina and Florida and all these different states where it makes a lot more sense, which is nice. And then all of a sudden I found myself one day underwriting 970 units and I was like, oh, how did we end up here? And then the best fun piece of advice you guys have heard me say before is the only difference when you're doing the actual underwriting, just forget about the deal itself, just underwriting is a couple extra zeros and an extra comma. Like, the numbers are the numbers, it's all percentages. I know I just stopped sharing my screen, but to go back to sharing it real quick, whether these numbers are in the tens of millions, hundreds of millions, whatever the case is, your summary these lovely numbers down here, which are, I don't want to say they're not the most important, like these are very important numbers. Like this is what you're looking at. This is what you're trying to hit your goals at. They're not
And
going to
make
be
your
any more
goals
or
better
less
than the numbers
digits.
on the screen. I want to make that pretty clear too. Like we don't want
Oh yeah, for sure.
we don't want the 6% IRR, everybody. That's not a good goal.
Yeah, this is more favorable, but you get my point where I can add as many zeros, as many thousands of units, and these numbers will never be any more than 4 digits, including the decimal space. Right? Maybe 5, but you get my point. Like the idea is don't dive into the deep end like that if it's gonna confuse you or intimidate you. But it's just numbers. Like what the underwriting is really numbers, and then understanding how to tell that story after. You'll get better with the more you practice, the more you pitch the deal, the more you bounce the deal off of other people. I used to spend days of just underwriting, kind of like too much at times I felt, and I was like tired of staring at numbers all day, but you have to enjoy it. I'm not gonna lie. Like if you're gonna do it a lot, obviously it gets easier the more you do it, but you do have to enjoy some of it. You don't want to be miserable every time you underwrite. It does help if someone underwrites it with you or underwrites it first and says, "Hey, now you're the second person to take a look at it, and hey, it's worth more of investing some time into." And don't worry if you make mistakes. I think that's gonna happen. Catching them is actually more rewarding than it being perfect every time because you're able to identify, like, hey, I made a mistake, but now next time someone else makes one, you're gonna catch that too, right? You want that. Like, how can I improve? And I think that's fun too.
Yeah, and that's a skill that only gets better with practice. So
Hmm.
I think that's
So
go
we
ahead.
can kind of like have that 4 minute warning of, are there any questions? I know there's some familiar faces, new faces. Generally speaking, regarding like anything regarding underwriting, deal sourcing, and whatnot, um, or just questions about the market, what we're looking at, what we're looking for, areas of opportunity. Um, Anyone hear about the accreditation thing? I don't know how many people have heard about that. I know a few big name and popular people on the YouTube and like with YouTube videos and interviews have come out and started talking about it, and a new book's coming out that's probably going to discuss it a lot. But like keeping up to date with stuff as just like that can definitely open your like more opportunity and like change how you look at the deal, and maybe this whole like multifamily is becoming more and more popular and more attainable by more people, I believe, than ever.
Well, yeah, look, I mean, there's more education out there. There's stuff like us. There's constant content being developed and shipped out over the, I was about to say the airwaves, over the intertubes. But at the end of the day, what's important is kind of I touched on about your buy criteria, your buy box. Like you got to stick that box together and stick to it. Don't find reasons to step out of it when you see a deal. Don't stay to your values, because again that's going to be protecting you moving forward, because you probably made those buy criteria up based on some really good reasons initially. So never lose sight of that, whether it be the vintage, location, maybe how it's managed or operated, or maybe you only want to buy buildings that have a metal roof. I don't know, but like whatever that reason is, unit mix, etc., stick to it. And you're gonna find the deals. There's gonna be plenty of deals this year, guys. I'm seeing the deal flow already opening up to where, like, over the last week I had to like simmer myself down. I was like staying up late because I was having so many deals sent to me, offered, figured out, that you can't take them all down. And you gotta really decide which ones are not just the base hits that can keep you busy, but the ones that you really want to chase down.
And to that point, if you're looking like, okay, how do I get started? Like you're solo right now, which kind of is how everyone starts, right? Um, if you want to work with people, cool. What are they looking for? Like, pick someone. Like, it doesn't have to be us. Would I love to work with all of you? Sure, absolutely. Like, I like working with the people in the community because you guys spend your time to come listen to us, and I appreciate that a lot. I don't want that to be like unsaid. Like, thank you guys for being here. But whoever, like, now, one thing I think a lot of people do, and I'm not saying don't because it has worked for people, just be cautious. Like, don't go for the biggest fish in your market or in a market because they are probably getting hundreds of deals sent to them. And I think Kevin can agree with this. There's a good chance they saw that deal way before you did. And I've had that happen early on too, where thought I had a good deal or I thought I found something interesting. And then I share with some people, they're like, oh yeah, we saw this months ago. It's still available. And I'm like, oh, like I
Well,
wish I knew that sooner.
It happened to us literally last night, right?
Oh yeah. Someone
And
randomly
so,
sent me a deal,
yeah,
and then I was like, um, anything in a specific part of the U.S. I send like to Kevin and just say like, look, I've learned if Kevin's seen it or if there's a deal within a couple 100-mile radius from Kevin, if he hasn't seen it, okay, we'll go look at it. Like, all right,
yeah.
or like, I guess to doing like a little bit of the um initial underwriting, and then we'll go from there, right? But I kind of vet it first because if Kevin's already seen it or if he has a history with the deal, it's not worth for me to waste my time on it. And one thing that's happened to us as well before is a deal we thought were interested in, all of a sudden resurfaced when we thought it was a done deal and sold already, and it wasn't the case. And all of a sudden I'm like, okay, if anyone like, all right, Kevin, hey, I found someone sending me this, check it out. He's like, oh, I offered on this way back when at this price. Um, let's dig up some of the old documents and see if there's anything we can do with this time. Okay,
I mean,
cool. Save me
the
time, right?
sorry, yeah, the example. I mean, last night he sends me an RV park in Florida, and he's like, "Hey, check out this RV park." And I'm like, "Huh, that pad count sounds really familiar in that location. Let me take a look in my email." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, this one we offered it, negotiated down to a counter in April of 23, and then we walked away over like very small discrepancy of price. And the seller like never got anybody else to materialize the rest of the year. And all of a sudden, there's wholesalers out there like, hey, we got this amazing off-market deal. Like, here's this thing with their little buyer fee that they attach. And I was just like, oh, that's cute. This guy's still serious about selling. And oh, look, it's like now he's asking the price that's lower than what we offered him almost a year ago. And he's offering seller financing. So I was like, you know what? Let me call that buyer back and see if he's interested again. Like, and that's just because somebody sent it to Ed, and I was like, oh wow, this isn't interesting and surprising.
And it's
So
happened multiple times. So that's another thing too. I don't think you can ever network enough and not like you don't have to be involved or I'm sorry, you don't have to be the one like I'm buying in this or I'm buying specifically in this and like not look anywhere else. I would never say that because at the end of the day, for example, Kevin just calling somebody to say, hey, happy New Year. Where was it? You said Texas?
Houston, yeah, it's like a
Okay,
10 to 11
Houston.
million
So
dollar deal, and like I'm pretty.
yeah,
And if I send an
like
LOI, we could take it down.
yeah, you can get there much faster than I can, to be fair, which is actually I think the small part of it that makes me a little happy. Hey, I have a chance to get there first. Besides the point, um, like now all of a sudden, maybe Kevin or us, and like Kevin doesn't have a specific buyer or he's not interested personally. It's real estate. If you have an opportunity that somebody else would be interested in, you'll find a way to be a part of the puzzle and get a piece of the pie and have some involvement by bridging the gap. But you have to add value. And the more you network, the more you talk to people, the more opportunities that get brought to your table, the more value you're going to be able to add. And one thing I've said a lot, and you guys will hear me say a lot going forward, that's how you get a seat at the table, is by value. So you never know, just because it's not in an area you particularly like, if you see something that's remotely exclusive and you think you have first crack at it, and it's a deal, it has to work, obviously. Like you can be the first to know about it, but if it's a bad deal, it's a bad deal. Bottom line. Um, Talk to people like, hey, I have it in this area and this, and I got it from directly from the broker or the seller, whoever it is. And all of a sudden now you're like, you've brought someone to a deal that they would have never otherwise found, or maybe even had to compete for, which is another thing.
Yep, agreed. And but yeah, I mean that's kind of a good way to kind of segue this session out is just that, underwriting is super important because again, you get those good underwrites by having the good broker relationships and taking the moment to breathe, slow down, look at your data, look at your market, compile your demographics. You need all those things. Like you can't do an effective underwrite if you don't know what your market cap rate is and simple things like that. So, and again, as you're starting out, if you're starting out on your own right now, those relationships are, it's like a catch 22 almost, but you depend on the relationship to be able to call the broker and say, hey, can you go on, your tool, whether it be CoStar or whatever, tell me what the market cap rate is in Shreveport or Dallas or wherever, and they'll let you know, and then you can plug that into your sheet. Like you put all these things together, you start to get it figured out. If you're starting to figure out, okay, how do I get my rent together? You go on apartments.com, you pull reports. Again, call the broker. Can you pull a report for me? Make me a quick little comp report. So again, it's symbiotic. You get those good broker relationships. They're going to help you. And sometimes they're going to be able to help you get past the fluff, just like I'm able to just get documentation so I don't have to go through the OM that has the story they want to sell, and I can just look at the data of how it's operating.
Yeah, and then last thing I want to add before, obviously notoriously on my end, if you guys have ever been on the calls where I'm a part of, we usually go over on the time, but that's not surprising. Last thing I want to add is you will gain a lot of trust from operators, capital people, private capital people, and investors when you're able to really relay the underwriting, relay the numbers, set this expectation, like answer the questions about the goals of the property and how the numbers that you present are going to come to life. Because that's all it is. You're projecting something forward that then has to be put into effect and brought to life. You gain trust real quick when you're able to answer those questions. And like we mentioned earlier, you're going to be put on the hot seat. The better you handle it, the better they're going to, more likely they're going to want to invest with you, more likely they're going to want to trust you. It gets really, really stressful at times, but that's what we're here as a community to support you, help you out, give you the resources, and everyone go enjoy your Wednesday night. Can't believe January is over, but we'll see you all Monday for the next Zoom. Please let us know if you need anything. Our contact info is either behind us or in our name. You guys rock. You guys are awesome, and have a wonderful night.
Try
Take care, guys.
MFC.